Civilization, as we understand it, did not arise overnight. Long before the shaping of kingdoms familiar to the histories of men, there arose the first settlements that could truly be called cities. These settlements emerged not as sprawling metropolises, but as humble clusters of homes, each telling a story of ambition, ingenuity, and the relentless spirit, each born from the vision of people striving to root themselves within the vastness of the world. The earliest cities became symbols of permanence in a world still marked by uncertainty and strife. They were sanctuaries of artistry, strongholds of might, and vessels of lore, standing as beacons in the unfolding drama of Middle-earth's history. Before we journey further into the story, if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, it would help us bring more tales from Arda to life. Now, let's return to the story. The foundational texts of Tolkien's Legendarium speak of the awakening of the Elves at Cuiviénen by the waters of the long-remembered lake. These were the first of the children of Ilúvatar, whose understanding of the world and love of beauty would shape the earliest settlements. They did not construct walls of stone or forge weapons in haste. Rather, their cities began as careful arrangements of dwelling and garden, woven into the natural landscape with an artistry unmatched. Each home, each path, each sacred grove reflected not only a practical need for shelter and community, but also a profound connection to the land itself. It was in these early Elvish settlements that the first sparks of urban planning appeared. Scholars of Tolkien's work have noted that the placement of homes, meeting halls, and sanctuaries in these early cities adhered to a balance between functionality and aesthetics. Streams were diverted gently to provide water. Groves and glades were preserved for reflection and ceremony, and open plazas became spaces for gathering and discourse. These were the first lessons in urban harmony, a model of coexistence between civilization and nature. As time passed, the awakening of men in Middle-earth introduced a new dynamic to city building. Unlike the Elves, men were mortal, their cities pressed by the urgency of survival and expansion. Early human settlements were often fortified, reflecting the fragile balance between prosperity and vulnerability. Archaeologists of myth, drawing upon Tolkien's texts and appendices, identify these as precursors to the later great cities, intricate networks of dwellings, defensive palisades, and communal halls that became the beating hearts of emergent human societies. These first cities were not uniform. In some regions, settlement clustered along rivers, drawing sustenance from fertile floodplains. In others, strategic hills or mountains dictated construction, prioritizing defense over aesthetic harmony. What remained constant, however, was the interplay between environment, social cohesion, and cultural expression, a principle that would echo through the ages, from the earliest elf homes to the storied cities of Númenor and beyond. Among the earliest Elvish cities, scholars often cite Tirion upon Tuna as the quintessential example of architectural vision and communal sophistication. Situated on a hill overlooking the undulating plains of Valinor, Tirion was not merely a collection of dwellings, but a manifestation of Elvish philosophy and artistry. The city's structures were composed of finely wrought stone, yet they harmonized with the natural contours of the hill rather than dominating it. Streets wound organically between homes and halls, plazas opened to sunlight, and towers of white stone glimmered in the light, reflecting both functional purpose and aesthetic intention. The founding of Tirion also illuminates a key cultural theme in the early cities of Middle-earth: leadership and collaboration. The guidance of Finwë, the High King of the Noldor, exemplified a model of civic responsibility. Urban planning in this era was not dictated solely by rulers, but shaped through consultation, consensus, and a shared vision for the welfare of the community. Scholars emphasize that this early Elvish attention to governance, ethics, and societal structure laid a template for later cities, blending practical administration with moral stewardship. Yet not all cities arose from peace and vision. In Beleriand, the history of men and elves was inseparable from conflict. The earliest human settlements faced challenges of survival, hostile terrain, predatory beasts, and the looming threat of Morgoth's influence. Villages of men often began as defensible compounds, modest in scale, constructed from timber and stone and oriented around communal halls or central meeting points. These early settlements would eventually grow into fortified towns, such as Hithlum's coastal strongholds, where human ingenuity and resilience became intertwined with daily life. The interplay between Elvish artistry and human pragmatism is striking. While Elvish cities emphasized beauty and environmental harmony, early human towns prioritized protection, resource management, and strategic placement. Over centuries, these divergent approaches would converge, particularly during the establishment of Númenor, where the knowledge and experience of both elves and men informed urban development on an unprecedented scale. Númenor itself would become a case study in early Middle-earth city building. Maritime trade, monumental architecture, and administrative sophistication coalesced into a civilization of extraordinary influence. Throughout these formative eras, there remained a consistent thread. The first cities were centers not merely of shelter, but of culture, learning, and shared memory. Libraries, halls of lore, and communal spaces were integral to the identity of the city. The records of the Noldor, preserved in Tirion, and the chronicles of early men maintained in scattered halls and oral traditions remind us that these early settlements were as much repositories of knowledge and values as they were places to live. The mingling of Elvish and human traditions in city building became particularly evident during the First Age, as alliances and migrations reshaped the political and cultural landscape of Middle-earth. Elvish guidance often influenced human settlements, especially in regions where shared defense or commerce demanded cooperation. Architectural techniques, water management, and town layout, refined over centuries by the Noldor, were transmitted to human communities, accelerating the evolution of urban sophistication. At the same time, the pragmatism of men, their emphasis on fortifications, resource storage, and adaptable construction offered lessons that even the elves could admire. One of the earliest manifestations of this cross-cultural exchange can be traced to the regions of Beleriand, where Elvish and human settlements often existed in close proximity. Cities such as Menegroth, the Thousand Caves, although primarily Elvish in origin, served as hubs for allied human populations, facilitating trade, diplomacy, and joint defense. Its subterranean architecture, carved directly from living rock, exemplified both ingenuity and artistry, while the coordinated governance demonstrated an early understanding of urban administration that accounted for multiple communities within a single domain. The geographic location of early cities also played a pivotal role in their development. Rivers, fertile plains, and coastal access dictated patterns of settlement, while mountains and forests provided natural defense. Archaeological readings of Tolkien's texts suggest that the earliest cities were often positioned to maximize both security and connectivity, allowing for sustainable growth. Settlements near rivers, such as the banks of Sirion, benefited from trade, irrigation, and fishing, while those in elevated or hidden valleys could resist the raids of Morgoth's forces, illustrating a keen awareness of both opportunity and danger. Cultural and religious life was inseparable from the design of these early cities. Sacred groves, temples, and open-air plazas allowed citizens to practice rituals, celebrate festivals, and engage in communal reflection. The Elves, in particular, integrated their cosmology and reverence for the Valar into urban planning, ensuring that spaces for worship and learning were central to civic life. Human settlements, though often more utilitarian, still mirrored these priorities. Meeting halls, shrines, and oral storytelling arenas were central to preserving heritage and teaching civic virtues. Moreover, the first cities became incubators of technology and craft. Smithing, weaving, pottery, and other artisanal skills flourished within urban centers, supported by organized guilds and apprenticeships. Knowledge exchange between communities, both human and Elvish, propelled innovation, whether in constructing durable bridges, designing water channels, or developing fortifications resilient to both natural and man-made threats. These developments were not only practical, they shaped the cultural identity of each city, embedding values, history, and artistry into every stone and timber. The rise of Númenor marks one of the significant transformations in the history of urban development in Middle-earth. Founded as a gift from the Valar to men who had remained loyal during the wars of the First Age, Númenor became a pinnacle of human civilization, blending Elvish knowledge with the inherent adaptability of men. Its cities were not mere clusters of dwellings, they were thriving centers of governance, trade, and culture, meticulously planned and adorned with monumental architecture. Scholars note that Númenorian urban planning reflected lessons drawn from the earliest Elvish cities: harmonious integration with the natural landscape, centralized civic spaces, and the careful placement of ports, markets, and temples to serve both functionality and aesthetic values. Arnor and Gondor, later kingdoms descended from the Númenorian settlers, inherited and adapted these urban principles. The fortified cities along rivers and coasts became hubs for commerce, defense, and culture, reinforcing the enduring influence of early city-building practices. Minas Tirith, although constructed in later ages, embodies principles traceable to these early foundations: tiered architecture for defense, civic spaces for public life, and a deliberate harmony between the city and its natural environment. Even in the face of expansion and technological advancement, the essence of the earliest Elvish and human settlements, their integration of practicality, beauty, and social cohesion, remained visible. The role of these first cities extended beyond material and political concerns. They became repositories of memory, learning, and identity. Libraries and halls of lore preserved genealogies, histories, and teachings, safeguarding knowledge that would otherwise have been lost in the turbulence of ages marked by conflict and migration. In both Elvish and human cities, the act of writing, recording, and teaching elevated civic life, ensuring that each generation inherited not only physical spaces, but also cultural and moral frameworks. This emphasis on continuity and education demonstrates that the first cities were as much centers of the mind and spirit as they were of survival and governance. In examining these foundational cities, it becomes clear that the urban landscapes of Middle-earth were not accidental. They were carefully shaped by environmental pressures, cultural imperatives, and visionary leadership. Each city, from Tirion to Menegroth, from coastal human strongholds to Númenor's monumental capitals, reflects an understanding that civilization thrives when functionality, beauty, and social cohesion coexist. The lessons of these early settlements echo through the ages, informing the growth of successive kingdoms, influencing architecture, governance, and the very conception of what it means to live in a shared, organized space.
Despite their grandeur, the first cities of Middle-earth were not immune to change, conflict, and decay. Wars, natural disasters, and the rise and fall of rulers reshaped urban landscapes, and even beautiful fortified cities like Menegroth proved fragile in the face of overwhelming threats. Yet from these losses emerged resilience and adaptation, hallmarks of the enduring legacy of the first settlements. Exile and migration spread urban knowledge across Middle-earth. When the Noldor departed Valinor, they carried the wisdom of Tirion and other Elvish strongholds. Númenorian exiles brought advanced techniques in construction, governance, and diplomacy to new lands, seeding the foundations for Gondor, Arnor, and coastal settlements. Even in the aftermath of destruction, the principles of well-planned urban life persisted, evolving to meet the needs of new communities. Cultural memory was central to this legacy. Survivors preserved knowledge through oral traditions, chronicles, and crafted artifacts, allowing lost cities to influence future urban development. Architecture reflected societal priorities. Open plazas and communal halls fostered civic engagement. Water systems, granaries, and defensive works showed foresight, and temples, shrines, and artistic embellishments revealed a desire to cultivate beauty, spirituality, and cultural cohesion. The first cities were laboratories of civilization, where human and elvish ingenuity converged. They embodied lessons in architecture, governance, culture, and social cohesion, and were living symbols of aspiration and resilience. Elvish settlements embedded songs, stories, and artistry into their cities, while human towns preserved lore and genealogy, sustaining collective memory. Even in ruin, these cities left indelible marks, inspiring future generations and shaping the evolution of urban life. Through careful planning, integration with nature, and attention to community, the earliest cities taught that civilization grows not only from necessity, but also from vision, collaboration, and reverence for the world. Their legacy endured across ages, from Tirion to Númenor, Gondor, and Arnor, shaping architecture, governance, culture, and moral frameworks for generations. The first cities of Middle-earth stand as testaments to the enduring human and elvish spirit, revealing how communities can rise, thrive, and leave a lasting imprint on history. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to like, share, and subscribe for more stories. Thank you for watching.